Hi guys, welcome back. I am so excited. This is the third video I am filming for you guys this week, and I am so excited to continue filming YouTube videos. So this will be the entrance into my whole college experience and how I got into my career field, my dream job. But I think I wanted to do this video first because I know I was going to get a lot of questions regarding this, and there's a lot of gatekeeping, I feel like, when I came to what questions were they going to ask me, what questions should I prepare for, and my thoughts around it. So we don't gatekeep here. I've had a lot of my viewers in the past, they feel like when they watch my videos, they're hanging out with a girlfriend. So I brought you guys to my bed, chill area. We're hanging out and I'm telling you my experience, and if we're in the same field, then this will be a major insight for you. I definitely think if you are a viewer that doesn't know anything about the early childhood education field, this might be insightful if you have little kids and you are trying to send them to a childcare center, but you are also extremely nervous. These are some of the questions that they asked, along with we as an early childhood educator have to have a lot of requirements and a lot of things to make sure that we can stay working with children. And I'm going to break it down into I had two interviews in two childcare centers. One I actually got the job and worked at. The other one, it just didn't work out. She wanted me to keep waiting, and I was like, I need a job. I finished school. And then the other one was the board interview, which I did before all of these. Let's start off with the one at the childcare center. So this girl asked me 3 questions. It was a lot more chill, a lot more laid back. I was going to be in a preschool classroom. So a lot of my examples were regarding a preschool classroom. So she asked me, what are the 4 frames? If you guys don't know, I'll put it on the screen. But as an early childhood educator, in the early years, you have to hit 4 frames. And then in the kindergarten program, they expand a little bit further. So both the board and this childcare center asked me about those. And then this childcare center asked me to explain how 2 of the 4 frames expand into the classroom and how I can teach kids these things. So I went off of, I did well-being, and I did example of moving your body and eating food that fuels you in the proper manner. And then I did another one, which I don't know if it was expression or engagement. I'm not sure, but I just said another example of how I get children to hit those. Super easy, no big deal. And was also, I feel like, pretty obvious. What is your experience working with children? So at this point, I had 3 placements, plus at that point, I believe Leslie was only 6.5. So this was 6 months ago. But I also brought up that. I would also bring up in this interview, here's a tip, bring any nannying if you have nanny, bring any babysitting at the early years, and make sure you have ages on your noggin on your noggin? Can you tell I'm an educator? On your noggin? On your mind, keep ages in mind. Okay, so that was that interview, super laid back, no big deal. I also did bring my binder, which had all my certificates that I earned, my first aid, my CPR training, my vulnerable sectors check, my resume, my references, so on and so forth. So this binder I will recommend you always have to have in, I feel like, early childhood education interviews, because that's what they're looking for. Along with, now I've added my College of ECE, which is so basically to work in a childcare field, to work in a childcare center, you do not have to be a registered staff, but they do have to have a certain amount per childcare center. Personally, when I sent my daughter to childcare many years ago, pre-COVID, I made sure everyone in the building was registered. That was something that was extremely important to me and still is. But I would also have that in there, my registration number, and the fact that I would be with good standings. And then I would also add, what else do I have now? Oh, my diploma, a copy of my college diploma, knowing that I am graduated and have this education behind me. Okay, going into the next childcare center that interviewed me. Now, this center was a little bit more intense. I had 3 women interview me, the owner, my supervisor, that was also one of the staff members at one point, in a classroom. And then another one that was there for over 25 years who works a lot of CPS cases. So with this being said, this childcare center deals with a lot of that, and you had to be prepared for a child to walk in with any circumstances and know how to respond and react, and the proper questions to ask the parent, along with forms for them to fill out. So I learned a lot about this in school as well, so I was somewhat prepared, but these questions did slightly blindside me going into it. So the first one was, when was the last time you were in a classroom and motivated other educators? So when you're working in the early childhood education field, you're always working with 2 to 3 other people, whether you're in a childcare center or if you're in a kindergarten classroom, you could be working with an EA. And you could be working with a kindergarten teacher who is actually your equal, your partners in the field, in the same classroom, I should say. So with that being said, I just brought up a time that I was able to motivate another educator, and that spun into inspiring them and getting creative. No big deal. What would you do if you saw a child come in with bruises? And I answered this to the books, how it should be answered. When and how did you deal with an angry parent? So basically in this question, I had to explain my situation in my experience of how and when I have dealt with an angry parent. Something happened, and of course I did have an experience from a placement, so that was perfect, and I answered that just how they expected. What are 3 characteristics an educator must have? So basically, I just named different things. I was like, has to be patient, kind, compassionate. I just named a whole bunch. As a supply, when you're walking into a classroom and throughout the day, what would you do? So this one is pretty simple, especially if you have a supply job and it's kind of like your first day of placement. Every single day that you walk into a new classroom, you read the walls, you find out any medical information about any children there. You have to connect those dots, make sure you're very aware. Ask the names of the children. Get familiar with the sign in and sign out books, if there is any. In a kindergarten classroom, you have to ask the kindergarten teacher or the EA, who's ever in there, if there's any behavioral issues that you need to be well aware of, what kids need help more with transitioning. So things like that. I would also look if there's a class schedule on there, if there's any teacher notes left behind, many different things that you can do when you're supplying, the first things you're going to walk in there and do. But I always ask behavior, transition, and medical. Those are the 3 I always ask, because those are the areas where I feel like I need to be the most aware of, just in case. How much would you want to get paid was one of the questions. And this question is a very tricky one, because you never want to answer less than, because basically if you lowball them, majority of the time they're going to give you that number. So always go higher, which I personally did. And then if you look on like Indeed and stuff like that, like job sites, whatever they're posting that the hourly wage by, kind of go off of that and then make it like 25 or 50 cents higher than that, if they do ask you, I feel like. I also know my value as an early childhood educator, and I know how hard we do work, so I based it off of that. And I also based it off of how many years of experience and how much experience I had and how confident I am in my teaching abilities. What is 5 struggles an educator faces daily? And with that being said, I put like simple as just a child not wanting to do something. So you have to give them options, which is not too many options. If they don't want to put on their gloves, you say, do you want to wear the blue gloves or the yellow gloves? And then you give them the option. It could be as simple as teaching a child to do up their zipper. They really want to do it by themselves, but they don't want to learn. It could be as simple as like a child's really struggling to not want to come into school or childcare center because they just want to be their parent. It could be a big thing, like a child falling or hurting themselves, and you have to write an incident report, call home, whatever it may be in that aspect. So I just named a whole bunch of them, and they love that answer. Where have you worked in the past that we have talked about, your experience, and then the biggest lesson you learned. So whatever, I don't remember exactly what I said, but it was my biggest takeaway at the time that I said, and it was a good answer. So that was the questions from those interviews at a childcare center. Going into the board now, the board asked me 5 questions. I believe I had 3 minutes to answer them, each question. It was chill but super intense. I was literally sweating because this is the interview I really wanted. I was trying to showcase my knowledge, my experience, and selling myself, because that's truly who they're hiring, is my teaching abilities and who I am and who they envision as the educator. So for this interview, I just want to add, I wore a very high, it was like a tank top, but it was like very thick straps, like came all the way over here. So like the edge of my shoulder. It was, what is this? A turtleneck. And then I put a necklace on, and I had full face of makeup. And then I put my hair like this. So there was some in front of me, some behind me. And I sat it up with good lighting, and I was ready and on time. I was not on my phone while I waited for the Zoom to finally pop up, which I think is a big tip, is being professional in that aspect. I wasn't allowed any notes as well. So they asked me what are the 4 frames, and I was able, in the 4 frames as in like the kindergarten frames, and I was able to answer those no problem. I did make sure that like I knew those off the top of my head, because in the kindergarten field, you got to know the kindergarten program from How Does Learning Happen inside and out, and they do look for that, so I knew that. They talked about my experience, so I brought up all my placements that I've raised my daughter all these years. So those are the first 2 questions, super easy, not stressful. And then these were the 3 questions that I'm wondering if I have them on here. Oh, yes, I do. Okay. The 3 questions were, 1, how would you include diversity in your classroom? So this question can be answered 1,000 different ways depending on your background. But I just mentioned how I see diversity in the classroom and how I would bring it in with my own knowledge and educating myself on different holidays, different religions, so that I am well aware, and include children of all different backgrounds in our classroom, because the 3rd teacher in the classroom is your environment. That was very educator of me, but it truly is, and kids love to see themselves in the classroom. So I also said a whole bunch of things. I had 3 minutes, you guys, to answer these questions. It could be less than, but I talked and I really went into each thing. I'm just giving you guys a brief little touch on things. What is your goal to work on in the next year? So, as a registered ECE through the College of Early Childhood Educators, we have personal development each year, and we pick something that we want to focus on and really work on. So maybe it is bringing the outside in to create that into an environment. It could be focusing on well-being. It could be really focusing on a child's expression and how they express themselves in many aspects, in many ways throughout the day, through different classes, like lessons, I should say. It could be a more like hands-on play, all these things. So I just brought up something. Obviously, for me personally, like I wasn't in the field yet. I wasn't even registered at this point yet. They waited and all that jazz. I got the job, and I will talk about that later on. But I did know that this was a thing. So, and I learned that from my very first placement. This is why all your placements come in huge handy when you are getting to the early childhood educator field. So I answered that one as best as I could at the time. They were completely understanding and amazing. Rights to read. So basically an article came up a few weeks prior to my interview on how every child has the right to read. And they wanted to know my thoughts on that and how important that was to me. And of course, every child deserves to read. Every child deserves to learn to read. But I also was like, I think reading is far beyond the classroom. It could be reading signs. It could be going to the grocery store with like a grown-up, or maybe it's a freaking field trip, for Christ's sakes. And reading the words on things and putting the picture to the words and the words to the picture. It could be as simple as counting how many lockers there are and then spelling that word out with how many steps they're doing. Like, reading is truly everywhere. Learning is truly everywhere. And it's kind of easy to do that, but I was also like bringing a reading program into your classroom, whether it's on the school's budget or the teacher's budget. It doesn't matter. Bringing a reading program into the school, teaching about that, learning their names, learning letters and how letters become words and how sounds and words, like it all goes together. So I went very, very in depth on that one because I do think that is important. And that was kind of the 5 questions they asked me. They asked at the end of the interview if there's anything else I wanted to add, and I just said that my dream was to get into the school board and that this has always been a passion for me. And I just brought up that like I feel like all my experiences up to this point makes me ready for this. that's what the questions were. This video is very long and I am sorry, but I definitely wanted to give you guys all the knowledge I could possibly give you. Love you guys. Please let me know if you guys have any questions about other college videos you guys want me to talk about. Maybe it's something in my field. But anyways, I love you guys and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.